Hello. Today I would like to give you guys an update on my fishing character, in which is utilizing the new rune that makes 100% of your hits crit. This rune is extremely rare. I don't know, there's been maybe 50 of them that have generated in League, which is multiple times rarer than a mirror. And since creating my first guide video, it has gone up in price by 400%. But the reason we want to utilize this rune is because it can make things that wouldn't normally crit do crit. So we're utilizing that in two different ways. So the first way is that Herald of Thunder doesn't normally crit. And since it doesn't normally crit, it actually does a decent amount of damage. So that's the first way. So it's going from a 0% crit chance to 100% crit chance, which is nice. And then another thing is on this chess mod, this is the legacy version, but I will show you an in-league version in a sec. But this mod can crit, so instead of dealing 5% damage, or when an enemy exploded deals 5% of their HP and physical damage, this can also crit. So if you have a bunch of crit multi and a bunch of flat damage, then we scale this up to roughly 300% of a person's life, or a mob's life, and then that causes chain explosions. So before I get into the in-league and legacy POBs that I suggest, I will demonstrate
Your
what this looks
sanity
like.
is not promised to you here.
So I've done a bunch of testing to see what seems to be the best farms in the game currently, and I currently believe it to be either Breach or Blight. As a solo player, or with one character, I think it is Breach, which is this, what you're watching right now. And as you can see, I'm just running around, and my Herald is hitting a target, and then it's exploding, and then it's causing chain explosions due to the chess mod. So, yeah, it's a pretty AFK playstyle. Just blink around with Lightning Warp, and then if there's a very tanky mob, or if you're doing single target, you do Wave of Conviction. So now I will pull up the POBs. And I'll first show the in-league version, since the vast majority of people are in-league. So there's multiple ways to scale or do explosions. So previously there was Impulsa. I was kind of suggesting that, but it looks like you don't really get a lot of ES. You kind of need a 1000 ES chest to survive these 16.5 maps. So I don't necessarily suggest going Impulsa. So the other version, or another explosion version outside of Impulsa, again, is this exploding mod. It is nerfed from the legacy version that I was showing, so instead of 100%, it's 35%, but since the maps that we're running have thousands and thousands and thousands of mobs, this 35% isn't like that bad. So if there's 3 mobs around a mob, mathematically one of those 3 mobs are going to explode, thus causes a chain reaction. And in addition to this, I am also running or suggesting Oriath's N. So even if you get unlucky and there's 3 mobs and none of them explode, then Oriath's N also explodes, which it also can crit, which also, does the chain explosions. So instead of, again, Legacy mod, I'm using 35% explosion and then 30% explosion, and then this should definitely cause chain explosions. So outside of that, we are looking to, or we basically scale the damage through crit multi and flat damage. So since we have 100% crit chance, we get to run this amulet, which has no downside. Typically, you'd have a pretty big downside of 48% less crit chance, but since we have 100%, it's always 100%. So this amulet just gives 300% crit multi, which is insane. And it also has Culling Strike. So very, very good. As you can see on screen, it's 47% increased damage, which is basically double damage, which is nice. So that's the first way. Get a bunch of crit multi. This build, legacy, or non-legacy, in League, you can get this 700 crit multi. And then another way we're scaling it is through increase percent damage. So, monster explosion. So as you can see, we get a lot of increased flat percent damage from being a Golemancer. We're running 12 golems, and then we have a bunch of megalomaniacs that increase or give us primordial bond, which is increasing our flat damage. And since this is just generic flat damage, this is increasing our lightning damage, this is increasing our random elements for our flask, this is also increasing the physical damage that is coming from our chest. So it's scaling everything about the build, obviously, because it's just flat generic damage, and we're getting over 1,000% on that. So when you combine the 5% damage explosion with 1200% damage with 700% crit multi, all the mobs on your screen are going to explode, which is nice. And the second reason we're going Elementalist is because AoE on this build is really, really good. Because since we're funneling basically everything into explosions, we want explosions to chain. So that means they need to reach the next target to be able to chain. And so we're scaling a bunch of golems in golem effect because I believe our stone golem gives us AoE, or maybe it's our flame golem. I think it's our flame golem. Our flame golem scales AoE, and so since we have so much percent increased golem effect, we're getting a ton of increased AoE. Along with Heart of Destruction also gives 60% AoE. So that's nice. Another big thing about this build is we can scale up to 10,000 ES. Again, this is in league because we're running a 1,000 ES chest instead of Impulsa. So we get a lot from there. But also, we are self-hitting ourselves from using the Storm Secrets ring. Since we are self-hitting ourselves, we get to generate endurance charges through this notable, which is being converted from our Elegant Hubris. So we're having maximum endurance charges, and then we do a cast on crit in Mortal Call, which is giving us an extreme amount of tankiness. And since this is extremely reliable, I am always checking this. So this is giving us like what 40% increased or reduced damage taken, or 31%, I guess it says on screen, or in general, because it gives a lot more phys mitigation. But yeah, so this is extremely, extremely tanky, and again, it self-procs because we are self-hitting ourselves and self-procking the cast on damage taken. So this is up extremely reliably. And in addition to that, we are also taking another rune, which is increasing the duration of the Immortal Call buff by 30%, which is really, really nice. So its uptime is, I don't know, like 70%, so this is very good. Additionally, we are, with our Elegant Hubris, we don't need any attributes due to this node, so we're tattooing ES on all of our pathing nodes. And then we are getting 3 voices, which again is we are mainly looking for primordial bond, but also you can get other things like flat ES or leech or AoE or all resistance, just to basically cover our bases. The other thing that I will touch on is a very min-maxed thing that you can do with this build is actually make our Wave of Conviction actually do a decent amount of damage. So the only issue I see with this build is that if you get a Wildwood, and the Wildwood, you get like a ton of wisps, like 7 to 8k, our explosions, even though they do like whatever, 4% of a person's life or a mob's life, the amount of damage reduction that heavily wisp mobs get will cause, or will potentially cause chain reactions to not perfectly work. So in that case, you will need another ability that does decent damage, and this is Wave of Conviction. And since we have all the stats that we want, I'm using a basically pseudo 7-link gloves to make our Wave of Conviction actually do 10 million DPS. So only in this, whatever, 1 in 15 maps that you get extremely, or probably even more than that, like 1 in 40 maps where you get extremely heavily juiced Wildwood monsters, you will want a single target skill to help those explosions along and or kill really tanky rares. So yeah, this is one of the last pieces that you get. Again, this might occur in 1 every 40 maps, but a 7-link gloves will be actually pretty good. So that is the build for in league. I don't know what I changed. So this is my legacy version. So my legacy version does half the amount of damage as the in-league version, just because I'm throwing a bunch of quantity onto my gear. So I don't have 7 link gloves because I want quantity on my gear, and then I'm not getting a ton of damage from my amulet, again, because I have quantity on my gear. But outside of that, it's basically the same, except for since I have a 100% chance to explode on my chest, I do not need a second explode on my flask, so I run a Rumi's concoction, which makes me insanely tanky. So as you can see, uh, it's a very tanky build. If I take off Rumi's, the effective damage reduces by quite a bit, but this increases my whatever fizz mitigation because it's giving me 5,000 armor, which is really good for generic small hits in maps, which you don't typically get because again you're exploding screens, so you're not really taking a lot of physical damage. But there are modifiers like the tentacle map modifier for T17s. It does physical damage, so this Rumi's allows me to survive those. So I will link both of these POBs in the description. Again, this is a extremely exclusive build. Only like 10 or so people are currently running it, and it's very expensive to get started because the rune is extremely expensive. But I believe it to be one of the best clear speed builds in the game, and it's super unique and fun since you're using a fishing pole, and fishing's been a meme for whatever 12, 13 years, 10 years, whatever, and now it's actually viable. So that's my explanation. Those are my suggestions for in league and out of league. Hope you enjoy the build. Peace.